Mark Wogan, hello.
Hello, Steve.
Welcome to Virgin Radio 80s Plus.
It's a pleasure to be here as ever.
We met each other properly at Carfest a couple of weeks ago.
What a great weekend.
Oh, isn't it? And you were on Chris Evans' show talking about, the general legacy of Carfest. And I remember you said something that stuck with me. You said that your dad, Terry, would have absolutely loved what Chris had managed to do. And
yeah, he would have thought he was insane, the amount of effort he puts into it. Because if you're there at the weekend, if you've never been, it's almost worth going just to see how much effort Chris puts in. But for him, it's effortless because he just has such a passion for it that he just he's exhausting to watch on that weekend because it's non-stop for him.
And he's absolutely everywhere. Everywhere I turned, he was on that stage over the whole 48 hours, 72 hours. Yeah,
he's like the shopkeeper in Mr. Ben. He just appears out of nowhere. You have to be of a certain age to know what I'm talking about there. But,
So listen, we're going through your 10 favourite tracks. Some people say it's a joy to put together. Other people have lost hair and night sleeps. How was it for you?
Well, it was quite interesting. I sat down to do it. You very kindly got in touch and said, would I do it? And I sat down to do it, and they came really quickly. I wrote it, and then afterwards started to sort of think, I should have had that one. I should, And I thought, no, I'm going to leave it as it is. I am not going to persecute myself any further. All the songs I've chosen have a significance to me. They were important songs during that period of my life. So, I mean, there are lots that, in a way, the 80s gets slightly besmirched as a decade. But there was some fantastic music in that decade, and hopefully I've chosen ones that others will share my enthusiasm.
And I've got a million questions to ask you around these tracks, because what a decade it was for you, for your family, for your father. So we'll get through all of that, but you've picked, please introduce this first track.
So it's Once in a Lifetime by Talking Heads.
Tell me more about this.
Well, my brother, who's a couple of years older than me, and is in fact my business partner in the pizza business that we have, and all the sort of businesses that we have. So we're very, very close. And when we were growing up, obviously your older brother influences you, and he played this record to death. So it's sort of ingrained in my head. But when I hear it, it reminds me of the love that I have for my brother. Amazing.
Tell me about Dex's Midnight Runners and why you picked Gino and not Come On Eileen.
Well, Come On Eileen is it's more of a drunken party song, Come On Eileen. It's just, a room full of half-cut people stamping on the floor halfway through a song. Whereas Gino was a bit more gritty. And this was a sort of period in my life where, as I said, I'm trying to discover who I am. And you might have been a slightly angry or wayward teenager. I don't know about yourself, Steve, but I certainly was.
I had my moments.
And this really reminds me actually of dancing on my own in my bedroom, pretending to be a pop star, probably really badly. And if you ever showed me footage of it, my toes would curl so much my shoes would pop off. But I mean, it's just a great song. It's got a real kind of energy to it that perhaps, and a bit more seriousness to it that perhaps Come On Eileen didn't. But Kevin Rowland's ability over the years to reinvent himself has been extraordinary. Some of the reinventions a little on the bizarre side, you might say. But, I love him as an artist. I think his ability to adapt and change, and, he's always released good music. But this is my favourite Dexys track.
Mark Wogan's here. My 80s playlist, Madness come up so many times, but I'm pleased to say nobody has ever picked this song, which is great. And it's all about playing, maybe songs that are not the most obvious, but songs that you absolutely love. So come on there, Madness, Embarrassment.
I mean, I can pick pretty much any Madness track. I loved Madness, and when they first came out, it was that they were so appealing with the videos that they did, and there was a real sense of humour to their music and their performance, and they're still great now when you see them live. But
they really haven't lost it, have they?
No,
they're still
not at all.
Absolutely. The crowd love them. They love performing.
Yeah, they're fantastic, and and they wrote some phenomenal pop songs. But this one in particular, I loved at the time. But it wasn't until I was much older that I understand what the context of the song was about.
And what is it about?
Which is someone having a mixed race baby, and at that period the shame that could bring on a family, and the fact that despite all the humor they were still trying to get a message across and it really explained the roots of them as a band, I felt. But like lots of people, I didn't know at the time, and I think it's a fantastic song. The structure of the lyrics is amazing, and the story it tells, when you actually know what it's about, is actually quite emotive. And the nice thing is, it shows how much we've moved on as a society.
Yes. And a question I'm dying to ask you, with lots of these artists, we're talking about the 80s. Your dad would have been presenting, Wogan for a massive chunk, almost the whole decade, really. Did you go into work with him? Did you meet some of these stars through him? I mean, so when Wogan was going out, I've got tons of Anaraki questions. So excuse me, Mark. But
ask away, Steve.
Would he bring you in, and would you sit there? Would you watch the show? Would you go backstage and meet them?
Yeah. The funny thing is, when we were growing up, Dad very much kept work separately. He didn't bring it home. He didn't involve us in it as a family, because I think he wanted us to retain our anonymity. But at the same time, obviously, we were very excited when we did go into the radio show and whatever. And to go and see Wogan was fantastic, because you always had incredible people on. They'd have 3 guests, so you could go in and you'd have someone who had won Business Person of the Year on at the same time as a huge Hollywood star.
Yeah.
So there was always of course it was exciting, and we, being his children, got to be part of behind the scenes and see all of that. So yes, I mean, I'm incredibly privileged to be able to do that as a child and see it from that perspective.
Was there anyone that you remember, obviously being younger, that you saw via the TV show or via your dad interviewing, that you thought, wow?
I think, obviously, we were there for the first one, and Elton John was the first guest. And there's that famous thing where Dad walks on, falls over, and nearly smashes his teeth out on the
piano,
TV,
wasn't
on the
it?
edge of the piano.
Yes.
But being before, going to Elton's dressing room before and saying hello, and him sort of trying to feed us all and give us all the sort of, he goes, look, they've got some terrible food for me here, you eat it, and so that's a memory, and another memory is related to one of the other songs that I've chosen from that period as well. Which
well, we'll get into that in a bit.
We'll get onto that later.
Ghost House Specials. Mark Wogan's here. It's my 80s playlist. What a great song this is. What a great band. What a pivotal sound. And what a moment in time.
Again, they sort of came into my consciousness as a band around about the same time as Madness. And it was really about how cool Terry Hall was. I wanted to be Terry Hall. And
did he speak to you? Tell me about that.
He just had such an extraordinary look, and it was kind of, he was effortlessly cool. I don't know whether he put a lot of effort into it, but it came across as effortlessly cool, and and I loved the music, and I very much, as a kid, tried to emulate his style. It was a sort of toss up between him and Paul Weller, but really, sorry, Paul, but Terry just edged it.
Because he just spoke to you, is that right?
Yeah, it was that kind of thing of he always appeared like he wasn't trying too hard, but delivered as a front man. And it was a very different approach to lots of stuff that was out there at the time. You had, the sort of furious sort of anger of Paul Weller, and then you had the sort of jokey sort of fun thing that was Madness and Suggs, but Terry was just sort of there doing his thing, and it was very appealing and very influential to kind of how I wanted to be at that age.
And what do you think, this is interesting, with a track like this, it's very much, it's still quite edgy and fresh sounding today, over 40 years after it came out. What's the ingredient to that?
I think it's just down to good songwriting, and at the time when they brought it out, it absolutely captured the moment, because it was as all the riots started, and it was about the sort of destruction of inner city fabric, the demise of the inner city fabric, and it came out, and almost at the same time all those sort of terrible riots that went on happened. So it was a kind of it sort of caught the zeitgeist at that particular moment, and I think songs that do that kind of have, again, a sort of legacy that will live with them forever. And I just it's one of those songs that I can My wife thinks it's depressing, but I think it's a great song.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it does. It brings on a number of emotions. I feel happy, melancholic, but isn't that the ingredient of a great song?
It also reminds me of dancing with me Auntie Pauline.
Tell me about her.
Well, she's Dad's brother Brian's wife,
Right?
And unfortunately, she's no longer with us. But I remember very clearly in the living room at home, her going, she was, whenever she came over to stay, she'd sort of, have you got any new music? What are you listening to? She was always very enthusiastic about what your interests were as a kid, and I put this on, and I remember just dancing with her, and it's a very happy memory for me.
Mark Wogan's here on my 80s playlist. George Michael, then. Where do we begin with George Michael?
Well, I mean, the 80s really wouldn't have been the 80s, and actually music as a whole, he wouldn't be the same without George Michael.
No.
And I think, I was a huge fan of Wham, and in particular that Club Tropicana video. Just, you wanted to be their friends. You saw that video as a young man,
right now.
and
I'm thinking of budgie smugglers. I'm sorry to disappoint
well, I
you.
mean, whatever floats your boat, Steve. But I think it's that thing of, you saw that video and you thought, that's how I want to live. I want to live in Wham world,
yes,
all the time.
What was it about?
Fantastic.
About it?
I think the video was very clever. It was the colours. It was the attitude. It was the style of it all. You just thought, yes, the sun is shining. There's two handsome men surrounded by beautiful people in this lovely place. Why would I not want to be part of that? Mm-hmm. And on top of it was a great pop song. But I feel personally George came into his own when he became a solo artist, and Faith. I remember going to see that tour.
Oh, did you?
And seeing that Faith tour and just being, blown away by what a performer he was. And the staging of it was really grand. I saw it at Wembley Arena, and it was an incredible performance from beginning to end. And I just, and also, I was lucky enough to meet him when he appeared on Wogan.
Did you?
Yeah. And we went backstage before he appeared on the show. Dad took us in to say hello, and it was back when he had the sort of mullet, and it was very, very highlighted.
Yeah.
And he was in the process of setting it with quite a lot of hairspray, so you almost couldn't breathe in this room when you walked in. He was mid sort of, I think there was 2 cans going.
I mean, that would have been this
era,
the Faith era, wouldn't it? With the big,
And it was, and he was incredibly welcoming and generous and lovely with us, because we were little kids. But I mean, it was just, he was such a big star at that time.
Yeah.
I just count myself as very lucky to have been able to meet him at all, because in terms of his influence as an artist, and just song after song after song, any of those solo albums, they're the kind of albums you can put on and you can listen to from beginning to end. You don't skip a track because they're so good.
They're kind of works of art in themselves, aren't they?
Absolutely.
And they take your mind on each and every one of them. Take your mind on a journey.
And his voice. People don't talk enough about how good a voice he had, and it really didn't come into his own until sort of Careless Whisper and then his solo career, and you suddenly discover this guy has got it on every single level.
Was there a song, if I take you back to that evening you saw him live and this tour, was there one song you thought, oh wow, he's amazing?
Well, it was Faith.
It was this song.
It was Faith, because it had such, and it showed a little bit of edge to him as well that he kind of hadn't done before.
Yeah.
And also then the outfits as well, that that particular, I know that store that he got all those clothes from, and Lloyd, it was called Johnson's, and it was on the King's Road, and it was run by a man called Lloyd. And when we were kids, we used to travel up to London to hang out in that little corner of the King's Road where you had American Classics and Johnson's, and it was, you got all your ripped 501s from American Classics, and then you saved up to get a leather jacket from Lloyd at Johnson's, and he was a lovely man as well, and he dressed all the pop stars at that time, and it was a very cool look again.
Brilliant.